Direct IRMAR. Merci, Germanwings 18 Golf. Okay, I'm off. Your radios?
My radios.
On the 24th of March 2015, an Airbus A321 pushes back and starts its engines at Barcelona's El Prat International Airport. It's bound for Dusseldorf in Germany. In the cabin are 144 passengers, supervised by 4 cabin crew. It's a fairly full flight, with a wide variety of travellers on board, including business people, holiday makers, and exchange students. Together they originate from 18 different countries around the world, but tragically, after a series of events which will occur later in the flight, combined with a pattern of events that have occurred over the last 27 years, Germanwings 9525 will become news around the world in just a few hours' time. In the Airbus flight deck are a pair of pilots who will oversee the 2-hour flight. The captain is 34-year-old Patrick Sodenheimer. He's been with Germanwings for about a year, and before that was flying for other airlines across the Lufthansa Group. The Lufthansa Group is a major player in European aviation, as well as operating German legacy carrier Lufthansa itself. It owns several subsidiaries, including Swiss International and Austrian Airlines. Germanwings is one of the group's low-cost carriers. Beside Sodenheimer is a 27-year-old first officer, Andreas Lubitz. He has 919 flight hours and has been with Germanwings for about a year and a half. Lubitz's story began when he grew up in the small German town of Montabaur. Born on the 18th of December 1987, as the son of a banker and a piano teacher, he was first bitten by the flying bug when he took a series of gliding lessons at the age of 14, and it's clear that his passion for flight only grew. After obtaining his glider's license and continuing to fly through his teenage years, he applied for the Lufthansa Pilot Academy immediately after finishing high school. One of just 384 successful candidates out of over 6,000 who applied, his progression as a pilot was jump-started, and after passing his medical in April 2008, he travelled to Bremen and began his flying training with Lufthansa in September. He must have thought by then that his dream of flying for an airline like Germanwings was within reach, but at this stage he, nor anyone, surely could have predicted the mess of events that was to come. Germanwings 9525 takes off from runway 07 right at Barcelona at 9 AM local time. Lubitz is the pilot flying, while the captain monitors and works the radios. Given the controversial nature of Germanwings 9525, no CVR transcript has ever been released. Thus all the conversations you're about to see are based on the moments described by the official accident report, as well as snippets of conversations that have leaked into the media. As the A320 climbs out of Barcelona, the words spoken by the pilots are mostly limited to operational matters, until a flight attendant enters the cockpit.
Hey guys.
Bit of a delay that in the end, huh?
Yeah.
We'll try to make up some time for you on the way.
Sure.
Didn't even get a chance to go to the bathroom on the ground.
You can go anytime.
Okay, I better get going.
See you soon.
See ya.
The crew were delayed on the ground in Barcelona for half an hour. Before that, they operated the reciprocal flight from Dusseldorf, a long day for the whole crew. Besides the delay, the captain's duty has been completely normal. His main priority on this flight will be to make up some time for the delayed passengers. Of course, always keeping safety as the #1 priority. It would be expected that First Officer Lubitz would be on the same page, but events later in the flight will show that's anything but the case. It was 7 years ago, just after Lubitz started training with Lufthansa, that he had the first major hiccup of his pilot career, but it wasn't performance nor disciplinary based. Rather, only a couple of months after commencing flight training, the then 20-year-old experienced a sudden onset of depression. He reportedly had severe depressive symptoms, made several no-suicide pacts with his psychiatrist, and was hospitalized for a short period of time. A lot for a young pilot living away from home to deal with. His flight training with Lufthansa was put on hold, and he was placed on antidepressant medication soon after, with his recovery expected to last several months. Though he may not have realized it at the time, persevering and recovering from his mental health issues would only be the beginning of his challenges. At 9:27 AM, Germanwings Flight 9525 levels off at flight level 380, 38,000 feet. Now in the cruise on their second and last sector of the day, the crew are not too far away from signing off at their home base.
Our cruise stage will be fairly short for this one,
Hopefully.
so perhaps you could start preparing for the descent briefing.
We'll see.
It would take Andreas Lubitz several months to come to terms with and recover from his severe bout of depression, and as a result, when he turned up to the Lufthansa Aeromedical Center to renew his medical, his application was denied. In Europe in 2009, taking antidepressant medication automatically rendered an aviation medical certificate invalid. In order to prove his fitness to fly, Lubitz would need to not only overcome his illness, but also taper off his medication at the same time. It must have felt like a daunting time for the young aviator, with his career as a pilot faltering before it even had a chance to get going. He must have been able to somewhat recover though. Later in 2009, Lubitz's psychiatrist declared his severe depressive episode was over and recommended providing him with a Class 1 medical. The certificate provided to him came with one clear condition, however. It would automatically become invalid if the depressive symptoms were ever to return. This restriction would hang over Lubitz for his entire career, and when he travelled to the US to continue his flight training, further conditions were placed on him, making his medical invalid if he even required medication or treatment for his ongoing struggles. But for the following 4 years, no further relapses into mental illness were reported. Lubitz completed his flight training and worked with Germanwings as a flight attendant for 2 years. Before getting a start date as a pilot, he would complete his type rating and become checked to line as a first officer on the A320. It wouldn't be until late 2014 that a relapse into mental illness would begin to occur.
Germanwings 18 Golf, contact Marseille Control at 12718.
127.18, Germanwings 18 Golf. Marseille Center, Germanwings 18 Golf, maintaining flight level 380.
Germanwings 18 Golf, Center, cleared direct to IRMAR waypoint.
Direct IRMAR, merci, Germanwings 18 Golf.
Captain Sodenhammer checks in with Marseille Air Traffic Control, and we see the aircraft gradually changing heading to set course for waypoint IRMAR. It's from here that a peculiar set of events begin to unfold. 3 minutes after Germanwings 9525 initially contacted them, an air traffic controller at Marseille notices that the A321 has begun a descent.
Germanwings 18 Golf, Center, what level were you cleared for?
No response is heard from either of the pilots on the radio, as the A321 descends through 30,000 feet. Over the next 30 seconds, the controller tries twice more to get in contact, but nothing is heard. 1 minute later, possibly thinking that the pilots have incorrectly switched back to the previous frequency, the controller tries to raise Germanwings on 133.33, but again, no answer. Fearing the worst, and with the now rogue plane still on descent, French air defense tried to contact the pilots on the universal emergency frequency, one that pilots should always be listening to. But with still nothing heard, the Air Force scrambles fighter jets to intercept the airliner. It's already descending through 10,000 feet though, soon below the height of the surrounding French Alps. Germanwings 9525 disappears from air traffic control's radar at 9:41 AM. Back when Andreas Lubitz first began operating for Germanwings as a first officer, he would have seemed like any other young pilot settling into the Dusseldorf crew room. What was going on inside the 27-year-old's head, however, was to be unseen by anyone around him. The official accident report describes the timeline of events. It started in February 2015 with a trip to a physician, as he complained of vision problems and sleep disorders. With no physical reason found for the problems, he was referred to a psychotherapist and psychiatrist for treatment, then given sick leave for 7 days. But this certificate was never forwarded to Germanwings. Lubitz continued to operate as a pilot, while attending multiple psychotherapy sessions. He was given prescriptions for zopiclone and mirtazapine, drugs not approved to be taken by pilots. Through to March, he was referred to hospital for psychiatric treatment and placed on sick leave for 19 days. But again, the certificate was not forwarded on, as he was given more prescription medication. On March 24th, 2015, he was rostered to operate 2 flights, from Dusseldorf to Barcelona and back. On the first flight down to Barcelona, a peculiar moment was found on the cockpit data recorder. As the voice recorder indicated sounds of the cockpit door opening and Captain Sodenheimer leaving to use the bathroom, Lubitz was left alone to respond to a radio call, instructing them to descend to flight level 350. But the altitude selector was dialed all the way down to 100 feet, the lowest selectable altitude in the Airbus, for 3 seconds, before being flicked all the way up to the maximum value of 49,000 and then stabilizing again at 35. He repeated this bizarre sequence again when given further descent clearance to 25,000, before switching it back to the cleared altitude just as the captain buzzed back into the cockpit. The cockpit door system works by electrically locking and unlocking the door. A 3-position toggle switch in the cockpit controls it, usually left in the norm position. A crew member outside the cockpit wishing to gain access can enter a discrete code on a keypad. This sounds a buzzer inside the flight deck, prompting one of the pilots to move the toggle switch to unlock, silencing the buzzer and unlocking the door. If there is no response from the pilots, an emergency code can be entered, continuously sounding the buzzer and automatically unlocking the door after 15 seconds, as long as the toggle remains in the norm position. If it's moved to lock, no matter what code is entered into the keypad, it'll be disabled and a red LED will illuminate to indicate the door is permanently locked. As Sodenheimer re-entered the cockpit on descent into Barcelona, he would have had no idea what Andreas Lubitz had been contemplating as he was left alone in the flight deck, whether he was practicing a set of events planned for later, or was simply interrupted before he could fully commit to an atrocious act. Just 10 minutes after Germanwings 9525 disappears off air traffic control's radar, a fighter jet scrambled by the French Air Force arrives in the area of mountainous terrain, and it immediately spots the wreckage, though it resembles nothing like an aircraft. The largest parts remaining are just a few meters long, jumbled chaotically across the landscape, clearly signifying that no one on board could have survived. The most significant finding amongst the debris would be the black boxes, with investigators struggling to see a reason why a perfectly serviceable airplane would begin a distinct, uninterrupted descent into terrain. What they would hear on the cockpit voice recorder would not only surprise them, but send ripples around the world of aviation for years to come.
Direct IRMAR. Merci, Germanwings 18 Golf. Okay, I'm off. Your radios?
My radios.
While the CVR transcript has never been released, the official accident report describes vaguely what was contained on it, so we can piece together some of the events. Once Captain Sodenheimer left the cockpit, Andreas Lubitz was left alone once again. There's no way of knowing what was going through his mind, but it said in the report he was probably being affected by a psychotic depressive episode, as he wound the altitude selector once again, and for the final time, to 100 feet. He selected the autopilot mode, open descent, and the auto thrust changed to idle. Not one word was spoken by the first officer as the plane dived into its unending descent. All that was heard was his heavy but steady breathing. Through 30,000 feet, air traffic control's calls are heard coming through the cockpit speakers. They would call a total of 11 times on 3 different frequencies as the plane descended, while shortly after, the first and final buzzer request sounded as the captain attempted to regain access to the cockpit. It was likely silenced as Lubitz moved the door rotary switch to the lock position. The captain attempted to call the cockpit with the interphone and knocked on the cockpit door itself.
It's me.
As things became more frantic, more and more passengers must have realised what was happening, and Captain Sodenheimer desperately tried to gain access to the flight deck.
For the love of God, open this door!
Noises of violent blows then followed, as either an axe or crowbar was used to break through the bulletproof door. But for security reasons, cockpit doors are designed to resist small arms fire and grenade shrapnel if required, so breaking through the fortified door would have been almost impossible.
Open the goddamn door!
Leaving the fate of 144 passengers and 5 crew in the hands of Andreas Lubitz. As mountaintops appeared through the side windows and terrain warnings sounded in the cockpit, the CVR recording stopped as the Airbus A321 collided with terrain just a few miles away from the French village of Prades-Haut-Brion. It wouldn't be long after the crash that the news of a suicide plot with First Officer Lubitz at the centre would spread around the world. German detectives searched his apartment 3 days after. All they uncovered was one letter written by a doctor indicating that Lubitz should be declared unfit for work. To determine what conditions should disqualify a pilot from flying, aviation medicine uses the 1% rule. It prescribes that a pilot with a medical condition should only receive clearance to fly if the risk of incapacitation during a critical phase is less than 1% each year. Quantifying health risks, especially those related to mental health though, are easier said than done. So the simple and easy way for agencies to deal with it is the same way which aviation deals with everything. It's conservative. Rather than diving deeply into the issues or dealing with mental health problems on a case-by-case basis, it simply disqualifies pilots from flying automatically, placing the onus on the pilot to prove why they should be flying. So what's wrong with something being treated conservatively? The rules are in place to ensure the effects of mental illness, which are real, don't impact safety in the extremely safety-sensitive industry that is aviation. Well, we saw this play out with Andreas Lubitz, and the sheer amount of restrictions placed on him. The young pilot, battling a genuine illness, eventually recovered fully and returned to the cockpit. Thus a true parallax existed. By law, pilots are required to self-report when a medical condition renders them unfit to fly. But when Lubitz's illness began to relapse, getting help would not only mean giving up his dream of flying, but also his professional ambitions, his salary, and with it a €60,000 debt to Lufthansa for his pilot training. He couldn't even obtain loss of license insurance, as most pilots do, due to his mental health history. So the other side of the coin, and the dark truth about the aeromedical process is that everyone lies. Why would a pilot risk their job by disclosing a mental illness? They're incentivized to keep their mental struggles hidden, not only by the stigma that already exists in society, but by a broken aeromedical system. This even shows in the accident report of Germanwings 9525. It correctly states that the mental health of an individual is the responsibility of everyone around them, but also asserts that these people should report a pilot to authorities should they display any signs of a mental illness. while it blasts past the symptoms of a broken system in just a couple of paragraphs. All in all, it's easy to blame the accident of Germanwings 9525 at the hands of a young man. But what's being overlooked is what caused the pilot to get to that point. Band-aid solutions currently being applied for mental health in the cockpit aren't going to prevent accidents like this in the future. There's been plenty before and since the case of Germanwings. A redesign of the system and those that oversee it is required. Because at the end of these videos, you're probably used to seeing how every single cause of an accident has now been mitigated in modern day aviation. But the inconvenient truth about this one, the issue is still as prevalent as ever.